Hey guys, welcome back. I got a brand new tent in the mail today and I'm super excited to get it set up. I'm not gonna waste too much time on this intro because I've got a rain cloud coming in and I wanna get this thing up just in case I can do a rain test tonight, camp in the tent and see how it goes. LiDAR sent me this tent for a complete test and review. They did not pay me to say anything, so they are gonna get my honest feedback. And just looking at the tent, I found quite a few pros and cons that I'll discuss either as I'm setting up the tent or as I'm camping in it tonight. This spot right here is essentially the flattest spot in my yard. We did have a small pool here last year, so I feel like this is a perfect spot to set up this tent. So like I said, it's about to rain, so I want to get this thing set up as soon as possible. So I'm gonna get everything out of the bag, get the tent started. It is a self-inflating tent, so hopefully I can just pop it out of the bag, hit the button, and if I'm lucky, it came pre-charged. Just got 2 snaps here holding this thing together. I'm gonna put these 2 straps in the bag for now because I don't wanna lose them. And I'm gonna have to swap my camera out because the rain is coming. The battery came in a nice little package with a USB-A to USB-C charging cable. I don't see any power indicators on it, but this kind of battery I've seen before. It has a 1500 milliamp hour battery, which is almost the same as some of your older 18 volt tools, power tools like Craftsman tools, things like that. And this one's rated at 3.7 volts of output. I'm gonna unroll this thing as little as possible and let the battery do the work as long as it is charged enough to inflate the tent. And if I can find the place to plug the battery in, then I won't have to disconnect this thing all the way. So make sure when you put the battery in that it's facing as if the light is on top and the USB-C output is on the bottom. Then you're just gonna push it in, it clicks in place, and then you hit the power button. Make sure before you walk away that you have all the valves sealed. I started this thing and I can already feel the air coming out of the side or the valve, the whole valve. So let me get this thing tightened up, and I can immediately, now that it's tightened up, I can feel the tent start to inflate. So another thing about the tent is, just for this test, just for the purposes of testing, I'm not laying it out completely. I'm just wanting to see if the power from the valves from the air is enough to inflate the tent and sort of self-unroll. I'll give it a few minutes to try that. It still looks like it's inflating, but if the valve starts to bog down too much, then I'll go ahead and unwrap it a little bit myself. That way I can make sure that I get the full benefit out of that battery. Another thing I want to know in this video is how many times can I inflate the tent on a single charge? Before I get there though, I will inflate the tent completely. I'm gonna finish a few things, then I'm gonna take the battery out, recharge it completely, and then just see, inflate, deflate, how many times will the battery do that? I think I might need to go rescue this thing because I didn't charge the battery before setting it up. But before I do that, I'm gonna let it keep running, and I am gonna go ahead and get all the contents out of the package and show you what we got with it. All right, so that last sound we just heard means to me that the tent is completely full. These things are, I don't want to say they're rock hard, but they're definitely like harder than a pillow. And they're all set up. What I want to do now is just get the tent angled up where I want it, get some of the stakes in, and I'll discuss those parts as I'm using them. So this LiDAR's inflatable tent has a 6-sided hexagonal base that is 120 or just under 120 inches in diameter. It's also almost about 8 inches tall. So everything that you get in the package is, of course, the tent. There are 6 guy wires and they do come pre-assembled on the tent itself, ready to go. The guy wires themselves are just about 10 feet long. So as you get the floor set up where you want it, which I'll stake down the floor first, then you'll put these out, give it a little bit more wind resistance or wind proofness. And this brings me to my first con for this tent. This is one of the first tents that I'm gonna put into use that does not have its own dedicated rain fly. And the reason I bring that up is usually, no matter how well you do with gluing, sewing, sealing these seams, this thing did pass the 6-hour rain test according to LiDAR's website, but Every place on a tent where you have seams that have sew marks, that is a place for possible water ingression. And so what I want to do as this tent is set up in my yard, wait, see how it rains, and see if any rain gets into the tent. So the first thing you see coming out of the box is going to be this nice tent quality carrying bag. The bag feels like it's big enough that I'm not going to be struggling with it to put the tent back inside when I'm done using the tent. That's a plus. I can't begin to count how many tents that I've had where I was super excited to set them up, and then at the end of my camping trip, I go to put them back in the bag, and squeezing and pounding and pushing and zipping, and I just struggle to get the tents back in the bag. This bag has plenty of room to put your tent back in when you're done with it. So these were the two straps that were on the tent when I first pulled it out of the bag. And this was the container that had the battery in it. And it looks like the little patches are inside of the battery case. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Inside this container, I've got 3 clear repair patches, as well as this USB-A to USB-C cable. This cable is a little short, but when I pull the battery out, the battery's so small that I'll be able to hook it up anywhere I need to. So the next thing in that bag is what appears to be the poles for the 2 sort of awning entrances. In a minute here, as I get the tent set up, I will extend these 2 awnings to add a little bit of airflow inside the tent. And here's a second, what I would call parts bag. And this parts bag it's got 6 tent patches. So as you poke holes in the tent, as you're moving it around, as it starts to age, you will be able to glue some of these onto the tent. So in the battery box, those other patches were for the air beams. Those air beams, if you get a hole in them and they start to leak, you can simply attach one of those patches, wait about 4 hours, and then you're good to reinflate the tent. Inside that bag, there are also 6 additional guy wires, as well as, I'm gonna count them, but it feels like about 12 stakes. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got a massive supply of 17 stakes. These things are essentially large nails just with a spot for the wire to go in, so you don't bang them too far to the ground. Guys, I think I spoke too soon about the tent fly. All of the videos that I saw when I was researching this tent did not have a fly on it, and so I'm pretty sure, let's see. This turns out to be, and we will set this up later in the video, but this is essentially an awning that you can set up next to the tent, for example, to have your kitchen appliances under that for some rain protection. All right, guys, so besides a rain fly, the only other thing that I'm skeptical about is the package did not come with a small hammer or anything. Now, normally a small hammer is something that is assumed, like, hey, if you buy a cheap tent, you're gonna have to bring a hammer. But for the cost and premium quality of this tent, I would recommend the manufacturer just throw in a little like 3-pound hammer just for the specific purpose of driving these stakes in. But I'm a little crafty, and so I don't have a hammer out here. Instead of going back up to the shop to grab one, I went ahead and found a rock or something. And this rock happens to have the perfect size handle for my hand, so. All right. I think that's good on that. One thing I want to make sure to do as I get this tent staked down is I want to go ahead and get the corners as tight as possible. Oh, and that went in perfectly. And so this is the last one, and one thing I'm noticing is you will want to make sure that you have all the ends evenly spaced out, because due to its hexagonal shape, you may want to tighten them from end to end as opposed to the way I did it. That way you make sure that you have the full expansion of the arches as you're setting it up. Now I'm going to set the guy wires up. That way, if I do end up getting a storm or any very intense rain, I've got everything secured as good as it gets. Oh, sounds like I hit a rock there. Let's see. So now I want to make sure that I'm pulling the diagonal opposite. So I'm on a single one of the arches on the tent. That way I get maximum tension on these 2 guy wires so that I'm not putting any force that's gonna twist or pull the tent off to its side. Once I get this thing about where I want it, I'm gonna stake it in. And once I get all of them staked in, then I'll be able to cinch them down tight. And that should give me plenty of strength to keep this tent up in a storm. So same thing, I'm gonna pull this diagonal first, then I'm gonna go to the opposite side of the tent and get the next diagonal. And as soon as I have 2 arches in place, I would honestly say this thing should be able to stand up to some pretty intense wind because it is starting to feel very solid the way it's set up. So inside these bags, there are 4 pole sets. So to set up one of those legs, I know this is the foot, and it looks like there's 1 top, and then the other 3 simply connect together. So let's try this. The way this works, and of course there is the guy wires for it, I'm gonna unzip these 2 sides of this tarp. I definitely would not set this up on its full height. I actually would prefer it to be angled down. So I'm gonna pick the right amount. So maybe I'm gonna take 2 sections out, it looks like, from this setup, and then leave this angled out. That way, if I do happen to have this up and it rains, the rain doesn't pull back onto the tent and maybe slide into the door. I would rather have it angled down to protect it from the rain. I removed 2 segments and now I have 3. So when I get the next one set up, it'll look something like that. And yes, I will have to crouch to get into the tent, but for me, that's a much better compromise than allowing extra rain to seep in through that seam on top there while this thing's fully extended. I think that's enough walking around and talking about this tent. Let's step inside and see how it looks. Of course, all the windows are closed, so there is almost no air in here. The rain cloud just passed by and it never started raining. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all the windows open and let this thing air out a little bit. Now I'm gonna attach this tarp to the tent. I did set up the tent kind of backwards. I wanted the opening to be on that side so I could work over there, but there's only one side of this tent that has a zipper for this tarp. And so that's the side that I'm stuck with. Not a big deal, but let's get this thing set up. And then the other thing about this tarp is you can set it up either freestanding, which I think I would actually prefer to set it up freestanding. So I'm gonna do that anyway, but let me show you the zipper first. You just hook this up. Then from there, we'd use a couple of those poles that I showed you earlier, and you have a lot of area under this awning. This awning looks like it's about 15 feet long, and then maybe about 8 feet wide. So very big footprint. To set the awning up freestanding, I'm gonna grab a few of these guy wires and get them tied into some of those hooks on this awning. So I've got one guy wire tied down. Now I'm gonna stake it into place. The more I look at this rock, the more it looks almost like a duck or a rabbit. I don't know, what do you guys think? Duck, rabbit, or am I just losing my mind? One down, 3 more to go, and then I will have an awning. And the good thing I'm noticing is if I do it this way, I'll have 2 of those poles for one of these flaps, so I'll still have kind of an entrance that's protected. And then I'll have 2 of the poles holding the awning up. Now, if this thing comes out all messed up, you gotta forgive me, it is the first time I'm setting it up, but I have a feeling this thing's gonna be awesome when it's done. So this is pole number 1. It feels like it might be too high, but perhaps if it's high enough, then I'll be able to fit under the entire awning from edge to edge. I'm also tempted to remove one of these, but on the edges of the awning, I won't be able to stand up full height. So I'm gonna leave it as is right now and see how it shakes out. I think before I get too comfortable trying to set those poles up, I do need to get all 4 of my wires tied down. Then from there, I'll be able to put some tension on it and keep it standing. The humidity here is nuts. I can't believe how hot it's gonna get. and it's only June, and it's just gonna get more hot and more humid over the next few months. And ladies and gentlemen, we've got one up. Now the question is, can I get the other one up without pulling the thing over? And then if so, I'll probably put one more tie down, one more guy wire on this edge right here, or both edges, to keep this thing staked into the ground and fully tensioned. Okay, I made a hammock. And I thought my hammering was done for the day, but luckily I've got 2 more guy wires and 2 more stakes, so I can pull some tension on the top piece there, and that'll get this thing fully extended. All right, perfect there. All right guys, so as is, I've got just enough headspace that I can stand under this top center seam right here. But other than that, nothing on the edges. Now I could put some chairs on the edges and sit out here with some chairs, but I still have not used those other 2 poles. So what I could also do is take those 2 poles and put them on these 2 points right here, and that will raise that entire side up. I might do that because that would then give me plenty of space to work under the awning. One thing I'm really noticing as I look at the tent is this space, for example, is essentially a Ninja Warrior challenge. You will not be able to go around the tent in any direction without hitting one of these wires. Every wire extends out 5 to 10 feet from the surface of the tent. And so I may try to hook something up where I'm not tripping over these wires, but the wires are definitely an obstacle. So I ended up using all of the guy wires and all of the stakes. But I do have 2 more poles, but I don't have any more guy wires and stakes, so I'm not gonna be able to extend that flap out and tie it down. But I'm fine with the tent the way it is right now, because now I can set up my kitchen stuff under the awning, and I can go get my bedding and get set up before it gets too dark. The sun is setting, so I have about 20 minutes to get in there before I'm out of sunlight. But if I bring a camping light with me, I should be okay. All right guys, I gotta tell you something. I'm gonna sleep in this tent tonight, but I'm not gonna be roughing it. I've got a full bed set up, starting with this cot that keeps me ultra comfortable. But I've got to be careful not to poke a hole in the bottom of the tent. I don't think the tent is like flimsy or not sturdy. It looks like pretty standard tent material, but there's no sense in trying to poke a hole if I don't have to. And one thing about the shape of this hexagon for the tent is, so the hexagon shape may or may not be the ideal shape for a tent, because as I set this cot down, I've got the cot almost taking up about half of the internal space of the tent. And then I've got space here that's unused. There's no better or more ideal way that I could set this up. And so if I wanted to sleep out here with my family of 5, perhaps I put someone on the cot, and then the feet of some of the others could go under the cot, and I could better optimize this space. Otherwise, this thing is really only suitable for about 3 or 4 people. All right, got my cot out, got my mattress, got my trusty old green patrol bag, and then, of course, we are camping, but I need a premium pillow to stay comfortable. Well guys, it's completely dark out. It's actually almost 11 o'clock at night tonight, and it is still like 75 degrees. The heat, the 75 is not that bad, but it is intensely humid out. And so I'm about to lay down here in my cot. I am gonna sleep out in the tent tonight. I've got the door, that's the door right there. All of the screens open except for this back door right here. I don't think I'm gonna open that door because with the other 5 windows, there is plenty of breeze. If there is gonna be a breeze, it will come right through this tent. Before I get too settled though, this is, like I said, a luxury tent. And so I brought out a power station and a fan. I'm gonna set that stuff up just so I can have a nice cool breeze on me for the rest of the night. Here's a pro tip from an amateur. These windows, when they're unzipped, if you want to, just roll them up a little bit and they tuck into themselves. So now the window's not hanging out on the floor, it's not in the way, And I just saw there is a nice little pocket right here where I can store some stuff. And in fact, all 4 of the windows have little pockets, so wherever you end up setting up in the tent, you will have a place to put, hey, if you want to hang your phone or your wallet or your keys, you'll know exactly where they're at when you need them. And another thing I wanted to share with you is it is very humid out, and because it's humid, I've got these windows open. There's a lot of condensation building up in the tent. This is important to me because I'm gonna have this tent up at least for a week or so in my yard. But when I go to put it away, I will need to make sure that the tent is completely dry so I don't ruin it while it's in storage. And if you're still watching this video after all this time, please consider giving me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you are subscribed, just say hi in the comments. The tent is plenty tall, and in the center of the tent, sorry if this is blinding, there is one little spot where I can hang my light. The light that I have hung there is the same light that you see in all of my videos. And I absolutely love those lights because I use them. I'll use it all night long as much as I need it tonight. When I'm done with it tomorrow, I'll set it out in the sun. It'll be fully recharged by the next time I go camping. It's just crazy how good that thing works. But I've been laying down, I got the fan blowing on me. Hopefully it's not drowning out the sound on the microphone. But it's been an excellent night. I've got my tent set up. I'm super comfortable. This fan is giving me just the right amount of air or breeze to keep me cool. So I'm gonna go to bed and I'll see you guys in the morning. Slept like a baby in this tent. It did not rain at all. I left the flaps down all night, no problem. Slept like a baby except around 5 a.m. The bird medley came out. There were birds chirping all over the place, and it was wild. I'm gonna charge up this battery to find out how many times it will reinflate that tent from empty. All right guys, I'm cleaned up. I got a shower, drank some coffee, changed my clothes, and now it is time to deflate and inflate this tent as many times as it will go on a single charge on this battery. This battery did take a couple of hours to recharge from just that one use last night. And before I deflate it, I'm gonna go ahead and pull all my stuff out. That way it's not impeding the flow of the air exiting or entering the tent. Now we're gonna start this deflation. I think this is the deflation valve right there. And woo, that thing went quick. So for the purposes of this video, I'll call that deflated. I feel like I could probably get a little more air out, but for the sake of getting the video done, let's go ahead and get that battery installed. All right, I'm gonna call that one. The air beams are about as hard as something like a volleyball. So plenty of air there. Now I'm gonna just go ahead and deflate again. All right, so that one's actually attached to the tent, so it's not gonna fly away when I undo it. So let me get this thing sealed up one more time, and then we're gonna go for number 2. So that's my second inflation, and one thing I want to note is it is actually inflated before it pops up, and just giving it a little bit of a bump helps it get its shape. Now that it's got its shape, you know, I'm pretty confident it will stay up like this. So I've done 2 refills at this, and it doesn't feel very hot. I am going back to back. Normally you would never do that, but let's try number 3. So that was number 3. It did sound like maybe it started to struggle a little bit on this one. So I'm gonna go for one more and see if it can at least do one more. I have a feeling that this is gonna be the last go on this battery, but let's give it a shot. And the funny thing is, it sounded like it was struggling on number 3, but now that it's starting over again, the battery sounds like it's fully functional. So let's see if we get at least one more, number 4, out of this battery. That was number 5, and it didn't struggle at all. And in fact, I let it go a few extra minutes because I wanted to see if it would automatically shut off. I don't think it will automatically shut off because it's about as full as it gets, but That was 5. I guess let's go for number 6. If it fills up for the 6th time, I'm gonna call it quits there, because if you are using this and you're camping and you're moving frequently, after the 3rd or 4th time, I would recommend recharging that battery anyway. Well guys, that was 6, and in all honesty, that battery doesn't even seem to be struggling at all. Before I empty it out, I did notice that it's actually not fully inflated on this side. So I'm gonna go ahead and let it finish its job, and I will call that 6 is good enough, because it's not struggling, but there's no sense in destroying the battery if I don't need to. Okay guys, so I'm gonna call that 6 refills with this battery. It's not even hot, and it didn't even feel like it was bogging down, but I'm gonna stop it there. It lasts at least 6 times, which for me is plenty. All right guys, I think that is actually about enough information on this tent. If this is something you are genuinely considering purchasing, check out my link in the video description, and I'll see you in the next episode.